Hello, and welcome to Thinking Boldly. This is the podcast, the video podcast of the Consilium Institute. And we're very, very excited to welcome some amazing participants today to have a conversation about Consilium and how Consilium works in legal practice. So we're happy to welcome Trish Seifer, Gretchen Nelson, and Eloise Patterson. Just by way of background, the Consilium Institute is the bold answer to what's next in family law. Co-founded by myself, retired Judge Julie Field, and Heidi Webb, the creator of the Consilium Process, we have created a bold new answer to what's next in family law, specifically a better way through to and through divorce for families. So we're excited to have conversations with leading experts around the country who are embracing approaches and innovations that are similar to or actually following the Consilium process. So very happy today to welcome Trish Seifer, Eloise Patterson, and Gretchen Nelson. Let me briefly introduce you to them. Gretchen began her legal career with the district attorney's office and was head of the domestic violence unit there. When she had her first child, and I'm sure she'll tell us more about this, she stepped back from full time courtroom work to focus on raising her three children, but kept her toe dipped in the legal arena through ongoing family law work. Um, Gretchen came back to family law after her kids started growing. And she's been able to merge her legal background and training with everything that she learned from her years as a stay at home parent and is able, therefore, to help families navigate their difficult times. She joined in practice with Trish Seifer, who is her partner and the founder with Gretchen of Seifer Nelson Law Group. Trish has a psychology degree from Colgate and attended Villanova Law School. While she started out in big law in Philadelphia and then in Boston, she went to the Consumer Protection Division at the Massachusetts Attorney General's office and, similar to her partner, stayed home with children for a while. Both Gretchen and Trish decided that they wanted to embrace the challenge and the joy of doing family law. And so when they started their firm, that was what they decided to focus on. And they were lucky enough to partner and become close allies with Eloise Patterson. Eloise is a financial coach, and she started Clementine Financial Coaching in Lincoln, Massachusetts in 2018 as the next stage of her career in financial services. Eloise is a great fit for the Seaford Nelson Law Office because she works with individuals in divorce cases and helps to support the client's legal team. Eloise started out as a commercial lender in the Bank of Boston, in Boston and London. And after business school, she worked as the Treasury Director for Discovery Communications, Inc. In Maryland. And like her colleagues, has raised her four children, but stayed involved in community and school affairs, and has a strong desire to do the bold new answer to what's next for families, all the families that are served by this remarkable triumvirate of strong, powerful women. So thank you so much for joining us. I just feel so honored to have this conversation with you all today.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Julie.
So I will just add that I had the incredible good fortune of meeting Trish and Gretchen when they were on the precipice of beginning their practice. And their journey and their desire, their passion, their commitment to sort of helping families really resonated deeply with me. And I'd sort of been on my own sort of path a little bit ahead of them. And so was able to sort of look at what they were doing through my own lens and offer them my perspective of Consilium. And they eagerly embraced this idea when they began their practice and have really grown and evolved into leaders in the Consilium field of family law, and bring to it, as Julie indicated, sort of all the depth and breadth of their experience as parents, and as having sort of been in the trenches, as it were, with their own kids, as they sort of help families navigate the terrains and the challenges and the joys of parenting and of restructuring their families. And having Eloise join them in this journey has been, I'm sure, an absolute joy for them. It's a joy for us to know her and to see her be able to so seamlessly translate the difficult sort of financial aspects of divorce into digestible and understandable information for families and for people going through divorce. And finance is such an integral part, obviously, of the journey and of the decisions that people make that will impact them for the rest of their lives. And to have that become something that is so graspable, when often it seems like something that is so difficult and is so difficult for people to understand. And Eloise has an incredible ability to make to make things that can be very, very complicated seem, I don't want to say simple, but understandable. So really a pleasure to work with all of you and to welcome you here today.
Thank
So
you.
let me just start with the first question, if I could. What inspired you? Because Trish and Gretchen, you really were the two people that approached Heidi about the work that she had been doing in her office with Consilium. But you came to her and said, "What are you doing? How are you doing it? How can we do this too?" So t- tell us a little about that journey, if you could.
So I'll start. So I stayed home for 14 years and was raising my 5 children. And after a ton of volunteering in the community with Gretchen as a fellow parent at our elementary school, I decided when my youngest was around first grade to go back part-time to a small law firm in the area outside Boston that practiced family law. I'd done a little bit of family law at some big firms, wasn't sure how much I enjoyed it. I joined this small law firm that did family law, and I really, really loved it. And I thought it was interesting, and it made so much sense to deal with families and children. But after I started working there for a few years, what I started seeing was disturbing to me as like a person and a mother and a lawyer, just some kind of unprofessional behavior by other attorneys, lack of kind of communication with clients. It was just, people are going through a really hard time. And I started having like light bulbs go off in my brain that I can do this in a better way. I think I can do this in a way that makes sense to me as a person, as a professional. I knew Gretchen well and knew she was like-minded. And when I had this kind of innate just gut instinct, like, can I do this my own way? I approached Gretchen and I said, am I crazy? Can I do this? And she was also thinking about maybe going back to work after her kids were growing. And we met for coffee, and I sat on my computer one night and I typed a very simple business plan again, but she'd heard about Heidi and what you were trying to do. And my business plan and what Heidi was trying to do were so naturally aligned. It was just sort of a moment of divine intervention that we found out about you, Heidi. And we are forever grateful because it really meshed with what Gretchen and I wanted to create. And you helped us inform that from the moment we started in 2018. So I'll pass it to Gretchen if she wants to explain.
Yes, I would just say that just to add to what Trish is saying, that when Trish approached me, and it almost seemed too good to be true. It was sort of with a background in domestic violence. I had worked in Lynn and Lawrence, Massachusetts, and really had worked with people going through dealing with myriad issues, and I knew that working sort of in our community was going to raise similar but different issues. And the way that Trish was envisioning it was so appealing to me as sort of a way to pull on the pieces of my background that felt important to me, specifically sort of domestic violence in all its forms. I would say, I think it gets a, when we use that word with clients, we see them always flinch, but it really, to me, in my mind, has such a broader definition of what that means. I think what it meant to be a healthy family and an unhealthy family. I felt like I had a really ground level experience with that, of being in the trenches for multiple years doing that. And when Trish approached me with this idea, it felt so sort of like a perfect union of all the pieces of my life that I was interested in pulling on and taking into the next chapter. That I was actually running the idea by a good friend who's a therapist, who I think is also about to be Consilium trained. And she said, "You absolutely have to talk to my friend Heidi. This is a sort of crazy serendipity." And when we met Heidi and were hearing about it, there was so much overlap, but also Heidi's length of time sort of in the trenches doing the legal work, and also that was just something that Trish and I didn't have, that length of experience. That Trish had more than I did, and so it felt sort of meant to be. And we had a wonderful week of training, and just sort of, for me, sort of re-immersing myself in the law, and sort of starting to think of it with a new lens. And I'll just finish by saying that it became quickly clear to me and to Trish, and much more to me because I'm the least financial savvy of our team, that if we really truly were going to put into practice what we were talking about with Heidi, we needed to be able to simplify and make the financial piece of the process clear to our clients. And it was the only way we were going to be able to get them the best end result. And it just so happened that a very good old friend of mine Eloise was similarly in the path of life, that intersection of life. And I would just say, looking at the screen, it felt like it all came together very organically, but sort of in a meant to be way. So yeah.
Eloise, how did you come into the practice with Trish and Gretchen? Tell us about how you joined this journey.
I was lucky enough to know Gretchen and be recruited by Gretchen from my stay-at-home mom life, but was facing the empty nest and starting to think about what to do next. And we had a lunch together, and she started talking about what she was going to be doing, and asked me if I would be interested in working with them. And we were all at that beginning stage of not knowing exactly how to structure things, but I envisioned that I would start a financial coaching practice, working with people going through divorce, but also potentially working with widows or college graduates or people in transition, and people that did not have a lot of experience managing their own home finances, but trying to make it a less scary, more comfortable process for them. So I started my own little firm, but I work by myself. But then we just have enjoyed so much working as a team together. And as the practice has taken off, we have enough work that I really don't do any work outside of this practice now together, because I am as busy as I want to be, and I so enjoy the team aspect of what we do together. It makes it a lot more interesting and fun for us to do it as a team, and I think we offer a unique product to clients in the way that we can structure it. So I just have really focused on the divorce work, and also met with Heidi early on, and when I started to think about what I was going to be doing, Heidi was kind enough to meet with me, and she's the one who first said, you should really think about getting your CDFA, which is the certification I did get, and it has been so useful and really the basis of the work that I do now. So I'm so grateful.
As are we, to have you part of this whole journey.
So when a client comes to you for a divorce or advice, what do they get? How does it look to them when they come into your office?
Do you want me to take that one? So, well, Trish and I gave this a lot of thought, and we talked to different people in the beginning of how best to do this. And then I would say, Trish, we went and did what felt right to us. We give clients, we offer any prospective clients a 1 hour, no charge consult via Zoom. And all three of us are on it. Eloise started joining sort of halfway through our after we launched, because so many prospective clients, when they heard about her being part of the team, had so many questions that we were like, it makes sense. So we all get on, and we each have a piece that we talk about with our, and I do a divorce overview, sort of, we call it Family Law 101 in Massachusetts, and Eloise then takes over and speaks about her role with the financial piece of it and how she follows the process through, from sort of, she can speak more to that. And then Trish talks about Consilium, our firm philosophy, and, talks a lot about the restructuring and sort of end goals and that. And so I think we give clients a chance to ask questions. We don't give legal and financial advice case specific, but that's what we do. And I think we do a good job of really conveying, we always say, who we are and who we are not. And this is the kind of practice we have, and this is what we offer. And it's been very successful for us. And I think it allows us to meet clients and understand if somebody really is looking for a different kind of approach that isn't going to be a good fit and they're going to be frustrated with us. It allows us to make that determination. So
It's great.
Yeah. How about Trish or Eloise? You want to chime in on that?
Well, I was going to add, I did not start out doing those consults with them, and it ended up being such a game of telephone of sort of trying to piece back together what happened in that initial call. And I do think I end up being the first person after that call who really interfaces with the client, because we begin by doing the financial statement together, and that is a really great way to get to know somebody's financial history and to have them start to get comfortable with us, and it is such an integral part of the process. So it does make sense for me to be there in the beginning, and I've really enjoyed being there from the ground level in, and from that point on, we're all copied on all emails back and forth with clients all along the way. So it makes it a much more rewarding, complete process, I think, for both sides.
Mm-hmm. I have a question for you when you're doing that, and Trish, I want to hear your perspective on this too. Didn't mean to cut you off, but I am curious because I think the model's terrific. I also wonder, if clients are not resistant, but how revealing they are in that first conversation about their own personal history when there are three of you, sort of to try to meet and connect with about very intimate and personal details of their lives. So when do you feel like you get to that? And is that something that you're all having conversations about, or does that sort of get, I don't know, I don't want to say parsed out, but does someone sort of take the lead on that piece?
It's a great question. I think usually before Gretchen starts, we ask the person who's already completed an intake form and emailed that back, where we say, tell us why you're coming to us today. We ask them to elaborate or tell us anything else they want to tell us. When you come into a Zoom room and you see three people, like some people are maybe taken aback, the room is full, there's a lot of people on the screen. A lot of times we get very positive feedback. They see a team and they feel supported. So it's definitely a personal preference, whether that's like an innate, like, wow, there's a whole bunch of people here, and that's either intimidating or scary. But I think our general nature is so kind of warm and embracing. Gretchen usually follows up with a lot of good questions as they start to tell their story. a lot of times they do want to get specific advice, and we can't give that advice until we get an engagement agreement signed. But I think it varies. I think sometimes we've done this long enough now that we see not red flags, but we see like, okay, there's something there that they're not comfortable sharing yet. And that may come out, and if they do choose to work with us and we have room in our caseload for them, then it will come out early in the process. And I know, sometimes therapists say this too, there's the doorknob moment, like they're about to end, they're like, wait, just one more thing, right when they're about to leave the Zoom room. And then like the nugget. And often it's something they're really worried about that actually doesn't impact the divorce at all, or they're just ashamed or embarrassed. And we reassure them that it's okay, it's not something that's going to impact anything in court or, legally, and we will deal with it. But we always encourage people, once they do engage with us, that we need to know everything. And sometimes we need to know that information just because the emotional piece can affect the legal process.
Mm-hmm.
So luckily, I think we've had a really good track record. Many people, do they look us up before they come to us and before they fill out the intake form? By the time they've come in, they kind of know our approach, which is a very holistic mindset that really puts the restructured family first. So people are pretty forthright, not always, but usually early on in the process, they do start to reveal anything that they're worried about. And it is helpful for us to have all the background that we need.
Sure. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say in general, my experience is that you sort of watch them shed their anxiety over the course of the hour. And by the end, I feel like we often get I feel so much better. It's so nice to meet all three of you, to know who I'm going to be working with over time, and to understand your approach. And you really feel like it's a different person from the beginning to the end. I'm thinking of what case we did last week, where I just felt like there was a sense of relief, and like I could see myself working with these people. And that is a really nice thing, to be able to meet them and get to know them a little bit, and show them who we are too.
And I would just add, it is not to take away from Trish and my part of it, but I do, having done them for several years, just the two of us, and then having Eloise be join us for these for several years, I really see clients, when Eloise speaks about sort of the I would say almost like the demystification of the financial piece. To Trish's point, that people come in and they're very worried about things, and a lot of the time it is financially based. It is a fear that, it's like a catastrophizing of, I'm going to have no money, I'm going to lose my house, and I'm not going to be able to support my children. And that's been their blocking belief of why I can't pick up the phone and call. And I think that having Eloise sort of break it down and sort of say, this is what I do, and here's the presumption. And she talks about, beyond the financial statement, that she does these wonderful asset maps, and then does, settlement proposal, spreadsheets, quantifying those. I think just when she talks about it, I'm then having the benefit of listening, as is Trish, and you can just see the blood pressure reducing, and people say, I just feel so stupid, but I'm so reassured that this piece of it is that there's somebody that I can ask my dumb questions to. So I agree with those. We get a lot of tears, and we get a lot of honesty and a lot of emotion. So I think that I think we're all pretty, as Trish said, intuitive. So I think if we felt like we weren't getting information in the way that we're doing it, then we would be changing the model. But we certainly get a lot of.
Well, it seems to me, and I love that you meet as a team and give sort of the landscape of your practice, and how you sort of introduce both the law, the process, the philosophy, and the details, and then I think allow people to sort of interface with each of you on an as needed basis, but they know that they've got sort of the team as their scaffolding. And I think that's an incredible amount of security for them to understand how aligned you are as a team and how much you work together, but also that you have your, I don't want to say lanes exactly, because I think that you are interfacing, but if one of you, if Eloise, for instance, is working on the finances, that relationship is secure and they understand that that's the relationship and that's who they need to be talking to on this, but that it will translate into the court documents with you later as they move forward. It's really, really a beautiful process.
And just to jump in, I think one thing with it, a team on the screen can create a fear of, oh my gosh, I'm paying for all of these people. But I feel like we're able to put them at ease that it's really a cost-effective team, because Gretchen and Trish don't double bill when they're both involved, but they really like to work together and stay involved so they can hand off responsibilities as needed and be two pairs of ears, which is really helpful. And I bill at a lower rate than the attorneys. So it really does end up being a cost-effective solution for clients.
I think it's interesting. I mean, I think that you're making sort of transparent what often isn't transparent. And even if, lawyers may be consulting with financial people sometimes, but they're not in the room. And they're still paying for that. People would still be paying for that. Clients would still be paying for that. Whereas in your case, you're saying, this is the team we need to get you where you need to go. And this is the cost structure, and this is how we do it, and it's all very transparent. And I think there's a lot of comfort for people in that model.
Yeah. We had a client recently. We often, I would say we try very hard throughout the case to limit the number of times that we're all on a Zoom, just because, Trish and I come as a 2-for-1, but Eloise and attorneys on a Zoom, we know it gets expensive. But I think they quickly figure out sort of when they need all of us and when they can do that. And recently we thought that a client wanted all of us, and I sort of said, okay. And she said, I think that I'm okay. I think I was just planning on meeting with Eloise. And I was like, great, terrific, wonderful. But I think they kind of quickly, and almost in the way that children know which parent they go to for certain things, they sort of know that they're like, all right, Eloise can help me with this. And I think Trish and I even, each have things that I had a client once say to me, she said, okay, well, here's the new financial statement. Is Trish going to review it? And I'm sitting right here, but yes, I will give it to Trish to review. Trish is very good at investigating. I'm not so much. So I think that they do figure us out, but I do think we each kind of get a one-on-one, and then what we do is we talk about that a lot, and we'll bring it. And sometimes if one of us is, getting frustrated with a client or has a frustrating interaction, the other, I think it to Eloise's point, really helps us, because then we can talk about it, and Eloise might say, yeah, but they're living in a really tough financial situation. I understand why they might be, doing this. Or Trish will have a conversation, or Eloise might be getting frustrated, and we'll say there's just a lot going on with the parenting plan. And Eloise says, I haven't gotten information. I've requested it 15 times. And I think being able to talk amongst ourselves allows us to know when we have to push back on a client and when there's just more going on. So it helps us.
And to that end, every Monday morning, we circulate a to-do list for the team, and then we talk sometime on Monday, and we go through the cases for the week, and we look at, okay, Eloise, the financial statement's almost done, then I'll reach out. We make a plan together. So we're always in touch, all day. But on Mondays, we definitely focus, what do we need to do as a team, and who's working on what, and then we can kind of strategize how to keep moving the case forward. So it is helpful that we have these team meetings weekly.
Can you shed any light on how your Consilium practice informs your ability to interface with individuals who are struggling in instances like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll give one feedback comment that we did get from a client, that because of Eloise's very kind, warm approach with finances, at the end, we like to get feedback from the clients, and they said, I love working with Eloise and doing the financial statement, and there was never any judgment. There was no judgment if I was ordering in too much because I was going through a hard time and I couldn't cook, or I was spending, it's a judgment-free zone when we tackle finances. And again, I think it's just because Eloise is so thoughtful and mindful. It's So I think it's who we are as people with our interactions. And one of the other things we do at the beginning is really set goals with a client. We explain that we have like a goal-oriented mindset for them and their family. And so in the beginning, if we set the goal, like our goal is, what's your goal? I want to sit at a soccer game on the sideline with my ex-spouse and watch our child play together, like having that inform the process all the way. I think that they are comforted that we at the outset communicate with them and we're all sharing that goal for the family.
Great.
Yeah.
I was going to jump in saying that I think because there are three of us too, we each are going to perceive something different from the client, and so they get kind of better listening because each of us is not on stage all the time, right? So you're able to listen better and share insights. And I think Heidi and Julie, to the Consilium training that you led for me, that sort of understanding the different personality types and different learning types and potential barriers that people may have, and with three of us trying to figure it out, I think it makes us more patient and more perceptive to understand what each person is going through.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and I guess I could just say, Heidi, and probably owning that I'm the one that probably most easily goes to the place of being the firm person. That's a role that I fall into easily. But I think that the Consilium piece that comes to mind is, and Eloise is so good at following up on financial statement stuff, as long as that is sort of less falls on to me and Trish, unless she says, is there a reason why this isn't happening, and that we can shed some light. But I think what Trish and I do a lot is that, like sort of parent tensions are high, particularly right after filing, for example. And, we have a case now where they're on our Family Wizard, and we're trying to do a lot of coaching of what not to do and what works and what doesn't work in our opinion. And when clients have a really hard time translating that into action, what I find us doing a lot is saying, instead of trying to remind ourselves not to get frustrated with the client, but to say, listen, help us help you. Read, as Eloise just said, or Trish, like we keep redirecting them to the end result, and we say, if that's where you want to go, and that's what we've agreed, is where we want to head, then when you do these things, like when you send these texts and when you send these emails, that is, we can be as sympathetic as, we are incredibly sympathetic to the difficulty that you've had with this person. And it doesn't mean that we are not sympathetic. We are. But you've hired us to do a job and to help you and that means that sometimes it's tough love and you want to get there. This is not helping you get there. So I think it allows us to be honest and direct, but not to do it in a framework and with the sort of end goal vision. And I think Trish and Eloise, we see that to be very effective, of like reminding them. It's like, because I think that clients will often, they hear that and they say, yes, that's what I want. I want to be on the same. We had a client say that, the sidelines, and we're like, that's a wonderful analogy. But, when they're on the front line and they're out and, doing a handoff of children and it's exploding, it's like a constant reminder of it's, it's in every interaction that you have that's going to start to build that. You can't just snap your fingers and create the restructured family. It's going to,
it's a series of interactions, not a division.
It's a series of interactions, and your kids are watching every single one of them. And,
right.
And so I think that's where I think we the Consilium piece comes in. And we've had some clients, so we've ordered the book and sent them to them, and and we'll direct them to the website, and yeah,
that's great. Good.
So you all were really the first Consilium attorneys, the first Consilium trained attorneys who had the vision to inspire Heidi to teach you her process and to really to start the institute that I am so privileged to be part of. What was it like to be the first, with no one else out there doing what you were doing and thinking in this way, other than Heidi, right?
I think it's so hopeful now, Heidi and Julie, when we come to our Consilium meetings and we see all these great attorneys in Boston and Colorado, like it's spreading around the country. But in the beginning, you realize Consilium can be so effective if both attorneys on both sides have the same approach and philosophy. We were frustrated maybe in the beginning when we were the first, and we're still, you can't choose the other person's attorney. So we're handed a case and we get an attorney on the other side who's so opposite, not like-minded. They're just practicing in a totally different way. It reminds us of why we do it the way we do. But it's also hard to then implement and be completely effective when we're dealing with an unreasonable, not like-minded attorney that the spouse has hired. So it's frustrating, but we luckily had the good fortune recently to have a person from the Consilium Institute as second counsel on a case. And we said it was like, the knight in shining armor came in because that person was then hired, and we settled a really hard case in a very Consilium way. And we just saw it play out so beautifully that I'm like, this is the approach we're all trying to get to. We just need more attorneys to get on board with it. So we're privileged and honored that we were the first. Thank you so much, Heidi and Julie. And it continues to inform us, but we're very hopeful when we see so many other attorneys jumping on with us. It's great.
I would only add that I remember sort of, because it coincided completely with my return to law after a really long time, 21 years out of the legal arena, in a full capacity. And we had this training with Heidi, and I felt so sort of inspired and uplifted, and then got down into the trenches and was like, wait a minute, no, this isn't what it's supposed to be like. This is not what, so for me, I would say I would describe it as sort of a taming of expectations that kind of was like, okay, this is, it's not going to be, unicorns and rainbows, and not that was what the training was, but it is, it was an adjustment, I will say, to go from a vision and sort of being immersed in this is how it could play out to getting down into the trenches with attorneys that had just completely counter philosophy, and it sort of became that like almost like strapping on the Consilium armor when you go into court with those cases and say, okay, I am going to be true to who I am, and then and so I completely agree with Trish that it is so much more rewarding to do it when the attorney on the other side is thinking that way, because it can get frustrating when you're trying to do it and it depends on who the judge is, and the sort of 360. So meeting like-minded professionals through the Consilium network, I would say for us has been the most valuable part of the Consilium Institute is connecting and having conversations with like-minded professionals, and being able to refer them when a client's spouse is looking for somebody. It's such a gift to be able to say, sure, here's some names, you'd be in terrific hands. We will be able to get this done we can nearly guarantee that we will be able to get this done in a cooperative, conciliatory manner if your spouse were to hire like-minded counsel. And here's some names. That's huge.
Yeah. I think it's great to hear you say that. I think one of the things I've observed with you over time is to see your confidence grow in both your sort of skill sets and your approach. So I think that part of what's happened, at least from outside observation, is yeah, you sort of enter this with great hopes, and then it's tempered by sort of the complexities of realities that sort of like come down. But having more attorneys who are part of the tapestry, part of the network, and that you can rely on as allies, but also your ability to say, I know this works, and I can, you can fight me all you want on it, but I know that this is going to like help this family more than battling, through depositions over the next 2 years. So I think it's been really sort of joyful to see sort of you be able to shift from like timidly putting your toes into the terrain to saying like, we've got this, we've got this, and other people do too. And
Right.
that's pretty wonderful.
Thank you.
We always say that we do like a cost benefit analysis, like financial cost benefit, and this sort of like emotional family cost benefit of like, will this get us what we need to get us that will help resolve this case for the family or not? So I think the clients appreciate that. And again, to your point, I think through experience, we've learned that like we can do all that, but is it really going to be helpful? Is it going to cost money? Or can we kind of look at the heartache and the financial cost of doing that and get the result a better way? So that's also, we've learned that over time as we've grown with experience.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. And that sort of backs into, I think, what was my next question was, because you talked about this case where there were Consilium attorneys on both sides and you settled it in a Consilium way. What does that mean? What does that mean for people that don't know Consilium? How would you explain what that means?
Yeah.
Can I just interject one thing? Sorry, before you say that. You mentioned there was successor counsel. So someone was on this first, presumably not with a Consilium approach. So maybe you can talk about the difference between what happened with attorney one and what happened with attorney two.
Sure. So Gretchen and I are involved in all our cases. I was taking the lead on this one, and we had worked with this person. COVID hit, things kind of, nothing was happening for a while. We had an emergency situation where I had to go to court and file for custody, and attorney on the other side was, it immediately seemed litigious and aggressive. We really didn't have a choice considering the circumstances. But then we were in court multiple times fighting about issues that, had we been on the other side, we thought, let's just own the situation together and let's work through it for the family. And it was like a constant battle that brought us into court way more than we should have. And I think sort of the ability of the attorney to guide their own client and be like, look, this is how this is going to play out. Instead of me fighting the other attorney, let's own this. Let's get what needs to be done for you personally and for the family. It was just, and then it made it feel more aggressive and litigious, which wasn't helping the situation. Mm-hmm. And then they weren't getting the results that they thought they'd get in court. We feel like this other lawyer promised the family, like, I'll fight for you, to no good end. The facts were not in their favor. And then when attorney two came in, it was a little more like that attorney, who was Consilium, kind of owned the situation. And we immediately, I can picture a moment in the court hallway where attorney number two like sat with my client and me and was like, just even body language was like, tell me how you feel about that. Like, tell me what you're worried about. And we had never had a conversation like that with the other attorney. They'd walk by, they wouldn't talk. It was just, the communication was awful. And it was just from the outset, there was this like kind of physical metaphor moment where we all sat together and we were able to communicate, and not with the other party initially, but the last day we sat in a room next to the courtroom for an entire day, but all of us together. And prior to that, we had in our cabin, our beautiful office, 2 almost full days all together, lawyer, client, Gretchen and I, client. We had clementines for snacks and chocolate and nuts, and we had water. And then sometimes we'd sidebar and go outside and come back. But we actually had a conversation, and these people hadn't actually talked in a long time. And while we're not therapists, we feel like it was a very therapeutic experience to have people who were just reasonable and rational. And it was, it's still sad, and it was a sad day, but the other like collaborative is, the last day in court, and it was getting long and we wanted to get it done. Everyone was cranky and tired and hungry, and Gretchen ran downstairs and got snacks for everybody. And our client got water for his soon to be ex-spouse, and handing that to her, he said, was just like an offer, like, I still care about you. I care about our family. And it was like those little things, because of the approach, that actually made the biggest difference. And the ability to communicate and sort of advocate, but be very honest and reasonable. So I don't know if Gretchen wants to share. It was I wish you guys could have seen it. We were so proud to all embrace Consilium in that way.
I love it. I love it. Yeah.
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 No,
I mean,
it was fantastic, and it was everything Trish said. There was less of a financial component, but to the case it was pretty much the main issue was the parenting plan, but even so, it was, the client he's a wonderful client, but I think that this, in the end, the finances were the thing that was sort of, it wasn't about the finances, but it ended up being the piece that was a safe place to push back on for the wife, because the parenting stuff was so hard, and it was so loaded that it was a place that she could push back on. And I think that, again, Eloise had run a bunch of spreadsheets, run a bunch of calculations, and we had spreadsheets. And I will recall a moment where it was sort of the moment where we were like, this isn't going to get done. We're going to end up, we were sort of bearing down on a pre-trial conference date. And I can't remember if we called you or we just had it, but it was sort of like Eloise, it gave permission to our client that, like, listen, I know, really all that he had to give was retirement money. There wasn't a lot of liquidity, and he was anxious about that. But there needed to be some money given to get the kids settled, even though it was a short-term marriage. And I think Eloise sort of gave the confidence of, listen, you're going to be okay. You've saved well, you've got this, you're a certain age. I know it feels like a lot, but the numbers do support that there should be something here. And I think he said, and I can't remember the quote, but he said, I'm hearing you guys in this, and I I trust Eloise. So, right. All right, let's make the grand gesture. And we walked back in from the house back out to the cabin office, and the attorney too, I think his client had sort of turned away for a minute, and he looked over at us and and it was like this, it was this, and then, and then we sort of went back to the parenting plan the last day of the courthouse. But I think that the financial piece it was totally holding us up from moving to get across the finish line. And in relatively speaking, it wasn't a huge amount of money. And that felt like another moment where I think, just having that gave our client the permission, if you will, to be more generous than he felt like he should have to be, because he was so upset about, rightfully, with all the parenting stuff. So
just say, I think because we did these 2 4-way in-person meetings and we were all together, and sort of just because of our approaches, everyone felt heard and listened to, like, by each other. Before successor counsel came in, I think our client felt very, like, attacked by the aggressive kind of strategy that they were using, and felt always on the defense. And I think because we approached it both from Consilium, everyone felt like they're hearing me. Even if we're disagreeing and we're advocating, we are being heard by them and their attorney, which tempered things down, and made everyone kind of relax a little bit. That approach worked.
I love that. Between Eloise's sort of, wisdom with the finances and that approach, it's sort of, it's easier to be generous when you feel heard. And I think, for your client to sort of feel like, and to feel more secure. So it's like you're getting the security, you're feeling heard, and, you're allowing for someone to be generous. Is sort of like the old adage of the sun and the rain, and who's going to get the person to pull off their coat, and it's sort of like the sun's going to win.
Yeah. Right.
I think at least on the financial side, there's so often a power gap between 2 spouses and an understanding gap. And so if you're the less understanding spouse, you come in with such a defensive stance it makes it you're afraid to say yes to anything, because you don't know if you're getting taken advantage of. And I feel like what we try to do is take the emotion out of that piece and put it all on a piece of paper and be able to show people this is fair. You're getting a good deal, and just having an independent party. And my work often gets shared by both sides. It's for both sides. They can say, oh, that's a 50-50 split, or
Yes.
we're getting a fair deal, both of us.
Yeah.
And I've seen, I've had the great, privilege of seeing Eloise's work. And I know that, we talk about this in Consilium a lot, like what is a 50-50 split? Sometimes it's, 50% of all of the assets, each asset. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes that's not what someone values more. And seeing her able to sort of like parse those numbers over independent and individual assets is huge for people, emotionally as well. So really appreciate that.
I always say to Eloise, when she creates the sort of first round of spreadsheets after both financial statements are done, and she takes sort of a first pass at a 50-50 equitable division informed by what the client has said, Heidi, to your point of what their sort of, their dream scenario is. And Ellie sends it off, and I look at it and I always say, it's like, all of a sudden it's like the clouds part and the case becomes clear to me. And it's like, oh, and you can just go right into like, okay, this is what this whole case is going to be about. Like line, spreadsheet line 13 to 14. It's going to be, the house, we had a case yesterday where it's like, it's going to be the trading of the home equity that one spouse wants to keep with the brokerage account. And that's where it's going to go. But it just, the numbers allow, as Eloise said, the emotion comes away. You can look at it, and then you can go back to the other attorney and say, tell me how what you're proposing is equitable. Like how do you try and make the numbers work and show me something? So I love that.
You all have been very active members of the tapestry, right? So I want to know why? What do you see in the tapestry? Is it helpful? Is it what are the benefits of it? And what could we be doing better differently in the tapestry?
I think to the point we said earlier, we love connecting with the other like-minded attorneys, whether we refer them as counsel on the other side or we just ask them, do you know of any good parent coordinators or GALs? Like they're resources for us. But I also do enjoy the speakers. And I think some of the substance that we're getting, like just learning more about the domestic violence through technology, was fascinating. What Eloise was saying, just like kind of, mental health or personality differences coming to a case. I always walk out of there with something that I learned. And then I think of a case that it's applicable to, and it really helps us help us with our own client or help us understand a situation or get additional resources. So I think the speakers and the community are just wonderful.
Fabulous.
Yeah. Everything Trish said, and I particularly was going to, Trish, I think you jumped in late when we had that sort of organic conversation the other day where it was just a handful of us on, and Heidi, I feel like maybe there was an agenda. We kind of let the agenda go. Yeah. And I felt like that just ended up, and Eloise had a conflict, but we were filling her in later on sort of the conversation we had. And I also feel like that would be a piece that I sort of made a mental note, and then I didn't follow up with you guys, but to say, that was sort of organically very helpful and interesting. And almost, I felt like people were, it started off because somebody in the group had just sort of was like, hey, before we get started, I'm really wrestling with this. I could use your input. And it resonated so much with so many of us that I liked that sort of organic sharing with like-minded professionals.
The way that happened so organically, I think, was fabulous. It's the best of, in my opinion at least, the strength of the community, for people to really come together and, support each other in difficult situations.
Yeah. And I wonder too, I loved when you guys do the breakout groups. I've also had some really good memorable conversations with those. And I feel like somehow maybe the other day was a smaller group, so people are more apt to, there's more of an opportunity for people to, you feel a little less, when you have 25 people on the Zoom and you're speaking and you're saying something versus that. It was sort of like the small dinner party versus
Right.
the large cocktail party. I'm a small dinner party person. So
Yeah.
Great.
That makes all the sense in the world.
So doing the work that you do for families, all of you, every day is really hard work. It's really challenging. It's emotional. You see people at one of their hardest times in their lives, and often most lost time in their lives. So you take that burden from them. How do you carry that burden yourself in a way that keeps you strong and sustained?
I think that's why we have each other. I really think that having Eloise and Gretchen along with me, like we share the burden and we care and we can talk to each other about, gosh, we're so sad this happened. Like who's talked to this person over the weekend. I think it's like we're all colleagues and professionals and friends, and we all share the same mindset about caring for our clients. So I think just having Eloise and Gretchen for me helps me share the load and feel supported.
Absolutely. I was going to say that in the beginning of starting my business, I did do some work on my own, and I found it so much heavier to be alone with a client, and that the emotional piece felt much more difficult. And somehow being able to share it with each other, and also now with some experience to have seen people come through the journey and know what it's going to look like coming out the other side. That's such a hopeful, uplifting thing for all of us to see people go through the hard stuff and then start to see the light at the end of the tunnel and start to feel some confidence again. And it's really rewarding too. So both of those things.
And Eloise is given a good piece of advice to me, because we are both suffer from insomnia, that not to when we know there's going to be a big email coming in, not to, Eloise has said, I am not reading it before bedtime. No, awful client emails or opposing counsel. And I would say it. I think sort of learning how to manage it on a really logistical level. I think I think we're all quite protective of our weekends and things like that. If this case calls for it, we will do the work that's needed over the weekend. But I think that we're all good about setting boundaries, and again, not to keep saying this, but we can spell each other off. So I think that allows for all of us, it's like, someone takes a day off and the other two of us can fill in, or Trish and I are in court for the day, Eloise jumps in. But I think it does allow us to get mental breaks and compartmentalize, to be able to share it.
And I think to Eloise's point, because we've seen it progress and we've seen people, end up on the other side, and you have the hope, like we do feel so proud and kind of honored, and we see people just get to a better place for themselves, and they've grown and they've become more confident and more independent, and they've learned things. And so, the outcome could be so good for them, and they're just in like the thick of it moment. So we haven't had enough cases with success, even cases that have gone on as long as 5 years. But we're so like proud of our clients, and kind of like we care about like our little butterflies. Caterpillars become butterflies, and then they bloom and grow and fly away, and they're like, we're happy for them. So it gives us hope.
If just to wrap up, if there were one sentence that you would each think of or share with a colleague who's thinking about their law practice, their family law practice, and how you do your practice, what would you share with them? If there was just one phrase, one sentence, one piece of information or advice that you would give them, from your great experience since 2018, since you've been doing it this way?
Mine would be trust your gut.
Okay.
I mean, I can expand on that, but if you're literally looking for
Expand. Why?
if you're looking for one sentence,
I want the sentence, but the explanation is helpful as well.
The context. I guess for me, it gets back to sort of pulling on the different previous chapters of my life. I think mothering for me is so much about learning. It was so much about tapping into the gut instinct. Like you can read books and check in on things, but it's like, does this feel right? Does this is my children, as everyone's children's are, you learn very quickly that they're all very different and what they need is very, very different. And I think for me, I am somebody that I always loved academics. I loved learning. I didn't love law school, but I'm somebody that I'm a reader. I sort of, my children tease me that when I go on a vacation, I have the guidebook an inch out of my face to figure out like how to handle a bear coming on us. Read the guidebook. And I think motherhood and sort of marriage is so much more about the heart and the gut. And the divorce process, there's so much of that resonates. Is it, we'll sit there and the three of us will process the case as we've been talking ad nauseum that we do. And we're like, I don't know, we're really stuck. And it's like, do we do this? Do we file this motion? Do we, is it running the cost benefit analysis? And we'll go around and around and around. And then I think what we end up falling back on is, I don't know, what is your gut? Like we'll say to each other, what's your gut? And my gut is, yeah, we need to file, or my gut is, this is just not worth it. And I think we all three of us being mothers and being people who have been in long-term marriages, if I had to say, I'd say that's the piece. Eloise has certain training, Trish and I have certain training, but we sort of tap into that interior sort of intuition piece of what is right. And we're not always right, and sometimes we're wrong, but I think we try very hard to tap into that for our client, and like, what's really going on here, and do we really need to do this?
Eloise, what's your
I was going to say that saying yes to your client is not always the right answer. That you have a responsibility to be honest and give them sometimes the hard advice, and whether that's explaining the law to them and what the outcome might be, and something that we talk a lot about with other attorneys that sometimes we feel like are just telling the client what they want to hear and not telling them really what the outcome may be. And for me, that's sometimes can be telling them, no, you can't afford to stay in the house, and your kids are going to be okay if you have to move, and you are going to have to make that hard decision. But it's kinder to be honest than to say yes sometimes. So I feel like that's
the quote. It's kinder to be honest than to say yes.
Yeah. I like that. All right, Trish.
I agree with everything Eloise and Gretchen said, and I'm very much a trust your gut person. I feel like our whole practice was based on like gut instinct, and we've been very happily successful. I think like to other attorneys, I think it's more just like they're clients, but they're people, and caring about people when this is done is the most important thing. That you're going through a moment in time with a family, but they are a restructured family, hopefully in a better place for all of them. But sort of just to keep your eye on that goal as you do your work, and think about the family and the individuals as human beings and not just as clients. I think we've seen attorneys who feel like they like Eloise was saying, they don't give the good advice, or whatever their motive is. Maybe it's they're keeping the lights on in their office. Like they do things and they act and practice in a way that cares about the business or about clients. But these are people, and this is a family, and that's going to be true when we're out of the picture. So to approach all your work in that way is important.
Trish, my last thing is, it makes me think of when you were in court a couple days ago, and you were you should tell a story about where people sat in the courtroom.
Yeah, I mean, I was just, it had been a hard divorce process and we had done a conciliation, but my client, she was so scared. She actually asked to drive with me, which was fine. And she was very confident and was happy. And as soon as we got into court, she could not stop crying the entire time. Like, it was just so hard for her. And I sat with her and we went to the bathroom. And I mean, we would do that anyway. And we sit, and I noticed the other attorney on the other side, not only did she not sit like with her client, but she sat like in the front, like in front of the bench, like towards the judge. We weren't even sitting together. And it just struck me as like their relationship was so different and so transactional. And my client, we ran to the bathroom when it was over and we got her home. And she was extremely grateful just for like the emotional support and just the feeling of support, even though I was the one in court. Gretchen and Eloise were there with us in spirit, but their body language and the fact that they didn't even sit together was like just so surprising to me and odd.
I mean, not love that happened for the other person, but I think that so typifies the difference between a Consilium approach and not. And the word transactional, as opposed to interactional or interpersonal, I think is really a defining piece of what differentiates the Consilium process from just a family law practice. And gosh, that's just like the visual and the visceral of that story is really, really powerful. How someone could have sort of the same experience, a divorce, and have such a different experience.
Right.
So.
And to that end, Heidi, in this particular case, we've been done a little over a week with this client, but we have a wonderful paralegal now who's also helping us execute the division of the accounts, has met with our clients to hand them the escrow check, go to the bank. Like, this person just needs a little hand holding on that backside, and we're not done. Like, we're still here. Eloise is working on the quadro. Like, there's all these wrap up pieces. Like, just because we walked out of court that day, our relationship's not over. We're making sure we're hooking her up with a financial planner so she can figure out how to, what to do with her money. So it's not over. We are still there for you to support.
Because we're Consilium practitioners. You got it.
Yeah.
You nailed it.
Yeah. Right.
Trish, Eloise, Gretchen, thank you so much for your time, for talking with us about all the work that you do, all the passion that you bring to your cases, to your work, to your clients, and the care that you bring to everything that you do. We are just so excited to have you be part of our tapestry, and we look forward to hearing more from you in the future. Thank you so much for your time today.